Voices of Black Folk, we speak to people from a variety of different career paths, whether it be the healthcare field, education, real estate, business, finance, or private equity. We make it a point to show the world that not only are we here to stay, but our voices will be heard. Welcome to Voices of Black Folk. My name is Will Anyu, and I'm your host.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Will Anyu, and I'm your host of Voices of Black Folk. Today, we have an exciting conversation with three dynamic individuals talking about the doctoral journey in education. And so, without further ado, I want to allow my panelists to go ahead and introduce themselves.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Whitney Watkins. I am from Miami, Florida. I'm trying to remember everything I'm supposed to say. I got my doctoral degree in 2017 from the University of Central Florida in higher ed administration, and I currently work in higher ed at Barry University in Miami, Florida. I manage the Duel Enrollment program.
Fantastic. Tyheem, you want to go next?
So hello, everyone. I'm Tyheem Cooper. Preferred pronouns he, his, him. I am currently a Ph.D. student at Indiana State University, where I'm studying higher education leadership. At the time, I was working at Indiana State University, but I am now in Los Angeles, California, where I am working at Emerson College.
Fantastic. And Dr. Davis, do you want to finish us off?
Hello, everyone. I'm Kendrick Davis. I finished my doctorate in higher education at the University of Pennsylvania in 2018. And actually, I'm currently full-time consulting in Los Angeles. I just started my own educational research company. And I work part-time as an instructor in the public policy school at USC.
Yeah. Fantastic. So we can go ahead and jump right in. And so I myself, like you all, coming into my doctoral program at the University of Pennsylvania and thinking about, what I wanted to do and why this space. So I really want to prompt that question. So Whit, I want to go ahead and start with you. What made you choose your institution, and what was it about that school that made you think that's where you wanted to pursue your doctorate?
To be completely honest, there's not a super philosophical reason. So I'm originally from Miami, and I lived away from home for like 1,000 years. I went to school in Indiana. Shout out to Tyheem. I got my master's at IU. And then I lived in North Carolina for a few years. And so it was just really tugging on my heart to get closer to home. But I didn't know of any higher ed programs specifically in Miami. I wanted to, it wasn't all about the location. I wanted to be with a program that was reputable to, some extent. And so I kind of was like, okay, Central Florida is a good spot. So it came down to between the University of Central Florida and the University of South Florida. I connected really well with the faculty at University of Central Florida, and they actually have a program called the Home Scholars Program, which is specifically for doctoral students of color. And it's like a mentoring program, and it's national. So it's at a number of institutions. I think it's at Penn State. I don't know if it's at UPenn, but that was another thing that really enticed me to want to go, because I didn't want to go just because it was close to home. So I was like, okay, these other things are drawing me in as well. They had an assistantship that I was able to pursue. So all of those factors just kind of played in my favor, and that's ultimately what made me go specifically to that school.
And Kendrick, what about you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was actually teetering between doing law school or a doctorate in something. And one of the reasons I settled on UPenn was because, I sort of have an engineering background, have some sort of different passions and interests in different fields. And I really was trying to look for a program that, instead of me fitting into the box of like what the program wants for its students, a program that was flexible enough for me to allow me to pursue my varied interests within the field of education and outside of the field of education. And so one of the other big things, if you get into Penn's program, it's funded. So that certainly didn't hurt. And I think PhD programs are unique in that you have a different relationship with your advisor than you had in like undergraduate and like graduate school at the master's level. And you know, at the time I had a good relationship with my advisor, and the things that the research areas he was talking about going into were those that I was interested in, and he was willing to entertain my sort of non-traditional background. And I say that specifically because I visited another school in New York that will remain nameless. And they basically like crucified me for my like science background. They're like, we don't know why you're trying to apply to like master's or doctorate programs, your background's engineering. And I eventually came to the place where I was like, well, you don't have to understand me. I just have to like chart my own path, and somebody will see the value in what I bring to the table. And it eventually ended up working out.
Wow, that's
Amen to that.
definitely. And so, Tyheem, as a native son of North Carolina, what took you from the South to the Midwest, Indiana, of all places?
Yeah, so interesting. But so for me, let me have to go a little back to the backstory. With my history of growing up has always been more so in the poverty areas and things of that nature, where I witnessed a lot of friends and family be funneled through the school to prison pipeline, and things of that nature. And so I always had an interest of studying, school to prison pipeline, but that interest once attended NCCU, and then my grad at UNCG, I also noticed that students were also being funneled from college to the criminal justice system by doing something as you underage drinking or something of that nature. Then you automatically have a charge on your, you deal with police and you have a charge on your record. And so then it was just looking at the school to prison pipeline from the aspect of higher education, which is not really studied that much. So I came to Indiana, which is in Terre Haute, Indiana State University, and I met with the chair of the department, and she's happened to be a Black female, and she's a Delta. And so I was like, wow, you don't really get to see programs chaired by a Black female. And then one of the lead instructors was also a Black female that's having to be a Delta, a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated as well. So I'm like, wow, so this program it's just like ran by Black people at a PWI at that, and in Indiana at that. So it was just intriguing from the jump. I was like, on top of the 80% off, sign me up. And so I applied, and pretty much that's the backstory of how I end up at Indiana State at this program.
That's pretty dope. And so you kind of hit on something that and I touched on this a little bit earlier. As we think about individuals within this nation that have doctoral degrees, that's a very small number. And then when you start chopping it up by minorities, specifically Black people, that's an even smaller number. And so my next question, and Kendrick, I want to pose this to you. In your program, what was diversity like? Did you see many other Black men? Did you interact with other Black women? Like, what did that look like for you?
So in some ways I felt like I was fortunate, right? Because I mentioned before, like the advisor admissions like process in undergrad and like grad school is different than for PhD programs. And so my particular advisor was sort of like a lightning rod for Black men of color who were pursuing, different research agendas within education. And so I had a fairly like decent community. We were all at different parts in our journey, but I had a fairly decent community around me. In addition to that, I was really close with one of my cohort mates. And I think to the credit of the higher education department at Penn, and the professors in the department were really intentional about bringing people of color into the space, and had commented about how the program was like really white just like 7 to 8 years before, and now it was like predominantly people of color. And so that community, our cohorts were fairly small. So like I came in with 2 other people in my doctoral cohort. So there wasn't like a ton of support, but I think there was definitely some level of community within the department, and also community within the school. Like there were sort of Black affinity groups that you could tap into to the extent that you had capacity to or desire to. But
Thank you for that. And wait, I want to pose that same question to you, but I want to ask in a different way. So Kendrick just hinted that he didn't go to Penn looking for diversity. in your program, was that something that was important to you? Did it matter? Would it be like, if it's here, great. If not, I'm still going to go through it. Can you talk to us a little bit about like what that experience was like, being a Black woman within a space like that?
I was looking for diversity. For me, I was very used to going to big white schools. I went to Florida State for undergrad. I went to Indiana. And so it wasn't like I was trying to find a Black program because I knew that wasn't going to happen. But I specifically remember that when I was like perusing the site for the program, I was looking to see like, let me see what these faculty look like. Anybody brown? Anybody Black? Okay, I got somebody brown. All right, now, I'll take what I can get. And so I was looking for diversity to that extent. And then it became even more important to me when I found out that there was this doctoral program, this mentoring program for doctoral students of color. And so it was an interesting dynamic because I didn't get a ton of diversity in my program specifically, but I still was exposed to diversity while in my program.
Oh, wow. Thank you for that. And so, Tyheem, similar to you, we're both graduates of historically Black college in North Carolina, right? And so, one of the greatest challenges for me when I first began my program was the curve, because going from seeing literally Black people from north, east, south, west every single day to you lucky if you see a brother on Tuesday and it's Friday. And in addition to that piece, the academic piece, right? I remember my first semester, I took finance and higher education with Joni Finney. And I thought, Lord Almighty, I had made the biggest mistake of my life. This white woman is crazy. But that class taught me so much. It was by far one of the greatest challenges I've had in my program thus far. But I learned, and like literally today, I find myself just quoting, the GI Bill was posed because the government didn't want people coming back from the war and put us back into a depression. Zemeta 2012. And it's like, Will, why do you know this information? But can you talk a little bit about some of the challenges that you faced in your program and talk a little bit about how you've overcome those challenges, or even how you like segue them into like in a positive way?
So for me, like wanted to speak to your question about the challenges. I would say for me, it was just coming in with the amount of reading that had to be done before each class. Granted, in undergrad, you may have some assigned readings. You can get away if you didn't read something. You can, finesse your way through it. Here, it did not matter. You had to read, and it was books on top of books, articles on top of articles, just for one class session. Then once you get to class, it's just like, okay, I know everything because I'm learning to read and how to do it productively. Because I could spend all semester trying to read the amount of text that they assign. But it was really, I'm trying to remember, where did I get this information from? Because at this point, I'm mixing up. Okay, I got it from this text. Did I get it from this book? What was it? Critical race theory? Was it pedagogy of the oppressed? Where did I get the information from? I know it. Look, it was hard for me to keep track of the amount of information I was receiving and where I was getting it from. And I think that was my biggest challenge, because I was just reading so much stuff back to back, and I'm like, it's in there, but honestly, I can't tell you what book, what page at the moment. But so for me, that was a challenge.
Thank you for that. Thank you. And so this next question, Whit, I want to start with you, and then I want Kendrick to pick back off this. We are currently living in the age of Corona, COVID-19, the Rona, whatever you want to call it, right? And so,
Entanglement.
And so, as we're all aware of, especially within the field of higher education, things are going to change dramatically, right? And so, you have presidents and institutional leaders that are right now preparing to decide, do we bring students back for the fall? Do we do online learning? Do we do a hybrid model? What does that look like? And so, from your perspective and from your expert lens, what does higher education look like moving on?
I will definitely agree that higher ed leaders have no idea what to do. like I said, I work at a higher ed institution, and I feel like every other week I'm getting an email saying, all right, we're coming back. Wait, but hold on. Like, don't quote me on that yet. Check in next week. I'm gonna tell you what we're doing. Oh, wait, we're gonna order masks. But wait, okay. So remember what I said before, we're not gonna do that. There's so much confusion. I think there's gonna be a high level of accountability in higher education, especially since we're in an age and we're in a circumstance that we've not yet been faced with. And so, okay, higher education, now it's your time to show and prove that you are a necessity, right? So you have to put on your thinking cap, and how are we going to get creative with ensuring that our students are learning despite maybe or maybe not being able to sit in a classroom. I think from here forth, I can see remote learning getting a lot more respect. I personally haven't historically preferred to take courses online or anything like that. And you know, it has its own stigma because a lot of people are like, I prefer to have in-person classes, but I hope this puts higher education in a position of, you know, getting even more creative with our online learning. I think it's gonna push the envelope. I think higher ed institutions are really gonna have to, you know, dig in their bag of tricks to say, okay, in the event that something like this were to happen, let's say we have to be remote for a year, how are we gonna ensure that our students are learning? How are we gonna ensure that our students are measuring up to the standards of what they should be learning at this particular point in their college careers, you know? My hope is that our students are not shortchanged in the process, because despite the education you receive while you're in college, the expectations of what you should know by the time you finish are not going to change. So employers are still going to expect that you know how to do this, to make sure that you have a high proficiency in writing, for you to be able to give a competent presentation in front of people. But imagine if you've never had that experience, or if you had so few experiences where you're physically in front of a group of folks in a room, how are you really going to be able to, you know, do that? And so I just hope that whatever avenues they take, they are substantive, so our students are still graduating, you know, feeling like competent, worldly human beings.
I want to just like piggyback off of a lot of what Whitney was saying, and add on to the fact that it is a reckoning, right? Like higher ed will either survive, but has the possibility to thrive, right? Like, and I think higher education specifically is unique, right? So a very, very small portion, like 10% of the K-12 education budgets come from the federal government. But the federal government plays a lot bigger and more important role in the federal government, especially in higher education, especially when it comes to like federal financial aid. And I think it is a call for us to have like more culturally relevant policy making, honestly. I mean, Will, you know this, I worked for a year as an education policy advisor for Kamala Harris, like writing education policy, and got to know a lot of people on the House side, on the Senate side, doing a lot of the amazing work that happens. And I mean, you have like, you know, white men and women writing legislation for HBCUs, and they never set a foot on the HBCU campus. Like, that's egregious. That's absolutely egregious. And I think the other thing is that I think policymakers are becoming more aware of the fact that like everybody needs help. Like sometimes when you pass bills to provide like, you know, funding for basic needs, or you know, we're having debates over whether we should index Pell to inflation, and we're talking about a matter of, you know, a difference in $1,000 in somebody's pocket, that makes a difference. And I think the combination of this global pandemic, you know, via COVID-19, as well as the sort of racial unrest and like everybody sort of staying home, we've been collectively forced to deal with the fact that like we've been collectively forced to sit with ourselves. Yeah. And really reflect on like what it is that we're doing. Are we doing it well? Are we effectively serving people who need to be served? And the fact of the matter is, you know, those who weren't being served already knew this, but I think there's been a universal understanding like we're not doing enough. Yeah. We're not, and this is cuts across like racial and gender and socioeconomic ladders, right? Like there are, you know, well-meaning white people, middle-class white people who are standing on corners with signs talking about, I can't pay my bills, I need money. That's a reckoning that we haven't seen before. And so we've come to a watershed moment. I think the higher education community has the opportunity to step up or step down. And whatever happens after this will be our collective responsibility. I also want to sort of say that all students are not created equal and all institutions are not created equal. And so we really need to be paying particular attention to minority serving institutions, particularly HBCUs, who have historically been doing the most with the least. And I think we need to just take a hard look at, like, when we're talking about handouts or loans or grants, like, are we actually helping people, or are we just pretending to?
Are we actually helping people?
Facts. And just, sorry, that completely ties back into just how political higher ed is. People think that higher ed is just like cute little frou-frou. No, this is politics. This is politics. Yep. People are looking out for themselves, and they want to oftentimes appear that they are doing good versus actually doing good. Okay.
And I don't want to take up too much airtime, but I just want to kind of give an anecdotal example. So I was working on, before my fellowship was over, I was working on a pretty big, like a $500 million basic needs grant to assist with like food and housing insecurity, access to transportation, quality, medical care. And I could not I finally got in a room, and myself and staffers from Senator Warren's office and Senator Murphy's office from Connecticut were working together. I could not get anybody to touch homelessness. Couldn't. People were like, yeah, we'll talk about food insecurity. The housing picture, particularly like the government subsidized housing picture, is so complicated. And people also, and I think it was, Tyheem was talking about this, like this connection, right? And these overlaps between like education and housing, education and workforce, education and criminal justice. And the interlap, or the intersection between housing and higher education, is one that it deserves much more attention. There's much more attention, but it's so complicated, people don't want to touch it, right? Like, there are public housing lists that are wait lists that are 10 years long. And so from a political standpoint, if I'm looking at a 2-year or 4-year term, I'm not about to wade into the water of something that has a 7 to 10 year outlook, because there's no win in it for me. So to reinforce Whitney's point, higher ed is much more political than people even imagine.
Wow. And Tyheem, I want you to chime in briefly before we move on to the next question. So, as the current student on the panel, like, what were your thoughts when you first heard that, oh, well, we got to move everybody off campus, we have to think about distance learning, and just to add to the politics that both Kendrick and Whitney have spoken on, what was going through your mind while all this was happening?
Yeah, so for me, one, I'm working in high residential education, residential life, and so moving students off campus, one, I'm like directly hands-on, and then on top of that, I live on campus. I have students in my building, and I have my son that lives with me, and so you are asking me to go in to assist with moving students off campus, and which could be potential infected rooms or anything of that nature. So for me, one thing that I've noticed is that in higher ed, that student affairs, we were almost the afterthought, where academic affairs side was, okay, you go home, you can teach from your office, you get this. Student affairs was required to still have some type of direct contact with students. And it was just like, we could sacrifice you for the academic affairs, for lack of better terms. That's just how it is. And we study this higher ed stuff. We know that the academic affairs side has that more of a privilege tone to it. But for me, I'm also overseeing the multicultural diversity initiative here. And my concerns was for the students who had to go back to Chicago, some of the neighborhoods in Indianapolis, Gary, Indiana, and things of that nature, who one did not have laptops to just go home. We, leaders sometimes they look at some of these solutions from a very privileged lens when they're assuming that everyone had the capability and accessibility to do this type of work from home. And for me, being, like I said earlier, I'm from poverty. School was an escape for me from my problems. This was a way I can go away and focus and try to better myself. And I just couldn't imagine you telling me to go home back in that environment where I had so many issues, and then you're telling me, now go and be a productive student. Or your option is you can, well, I forgot what the term, but you can just pretty much just take a no grade for this semester and have to redo it over again, next semester. Like, again, that's a privileged solution. I don't have the time to do that. I don't have the finances to retake a course that I already started over. And I also wonder, like, how far should a university responsibility be, go for their students? Should it be a university's responsibility to make sure that that student that they admitted into their institution has a nice and stable home? Or should they address homelessness? Is that part of their mission? Or do you actually, once you accept that student, you accept the fact that you will have that type of parental guidance over them, even though they are somewhat an adult, and still help them succeed at your institution no matter what? We did not have online services for mental health or counseling centers. And so now when you are kicking students back home or telling them they got to get off campus, what are you going to do for them now when they would normally send a counselor every week and they are experiencing suicidal ideations and things of that nature? Now what? And so I had, it was just a lot, because I take it personal. I love all my students to death. And so I just really wanted to make sure that when you go back home, you are going to succeed. They are first generation students, from low income neighborhoods. And I really had that concern, while at the same time trying to balance my concern and my own stress. And because I'm like, I don't know what this virus is about. And I'm going to bring it home to my son. I have to be a teacher, a parent. I have to teach my son, then I'm also a student. It was a lot on me as well, but I'm trying to hold it together to better serve my students with no true guidance from the university, because they were also confused on what steps to go for.
And that actually prompted me to this question, right? So on our last episode of Voices of Black Folk, we spoke to 3 medical physicians who are on the front lines, who are dealing with COVID patients on a daily. And as we've seen, the numbers are skyrocketing. I think last I checked, we were at 150,000 deaths. Only about 350,000 people died around the world. America alone was at 150,000 deaths. So with schools like coming up with their plans for reopening, we've seen articles about professors that are like, I don't really know. We've seen articles about students that don't know what they're like, if they're going back in the fall, if they're doing a hybrid model, if they're going to be online. But not more, but like evenly importantly, we've seen this new act, right? Talk about the politics of higher ed, and just talk about politics in general, where Agent Orange is trying to tell institutions that if your international students aren't on campus, they need to go back to wherever they came from. And so, Whit, I want to start with that, and I want you so talk about that. So, like, what do we say to the faculty member that doesn't feel safe to go back to school? What do we say to the domestic student that's just confused about what's next? And what do we say to the international student that's terrified because either they figure out how to take online classes if their schools are even offering that, or they have to decide if they're going home, not knowing what type of home they're going back to?
I feel 7,000 pounds heavier with that question. That's heavy. I don't know. My instinct is always to take care of self. And so I think it just, okay, in this regard, for me, it's like basic Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? So you talk about, I need food, I need shelter, I need safety. So at the end of the day, if I don't feel safe going to class, going to school, let's say, I'm not going to perform and reach this higher level of understanding and actualization because my basic need of safety and well-being is not being met. And so, gosh, what do you say to the professor? If you do not feel that level of safety, or if you do not feel that level of comfort, you have to speak up and fight back to the extent that you can. But even that's difficult, because you don't want to say, you don't want them to feel like, okay, but if I say something, I could lose my job and I need my job. You know, like, I feel like this is, I don't even know what would be more uncharted than uncharted water, but this is that. So I just feel like I personally think it's disgusting, the fact that you're telling international students that if you're not physically in a classroom during a global pandemic, then you have to go back home. Like, that's just so absurd to me, when I can very well, like, and this isn't my, like, you're placing people in an impossible position and in an impossible situation. And I honestly do not know what to say to that particular individual, because my assumption is that it would have to do something with combing through policies, seeing what your rights are, seeing what responsibilities you can take on as a person in this particular scenario. Maybe my my other research folks in the room can speak to that. I personally don't even know, but I don't know. For me, it goes back to just trying your best to ask all of the right questions. And I mean, honestly, if you don't feel safe, then you keep trying to push that envelope. Like, honestly, I have no idea how to address that particular thing. I mean, I know what makes sense to me is to wait till the freaking thing is over or getting better, and then you have people coming back. But I mean, again, back to the politics, like, money talks, and, you know, you have to keep up this facade that this traditional look of a college experience needs to be maintained in order for you to have a substantive experience, which is proving to not be the case, you know, because you still have all of these different things to take care of, and you need to figure out how to make it happen without me sitting in a classroom.
So, Brother Davis, I'm gonna call you Brother Davis for this one. As a consultant,
Come on, research.
Consultant, you're constantly working with whether it may be policymakers, higher ed leaders, and so what advice, or do you have advice to give them on the subject matter?
I will offer the same advice I've been shouting for the past month. We need to stop talking about people going into schools of any sort in the fall. Like, that just needs to be a foregone, like, conclusion, that we are not going to pack students into K-12 schools or students into higher ed. One of the course coordinator for, I'm teaching ed policy at USC this fall, and there was a lot of conversation about, you know, what kind of model would you like? Would you like to do all online, a hybrid model, in person? And my response is like, what does a hybrid model look like? They're like, well, half of your class would come on 1 week. It's a graduate course, so like half your class would come 1 week, and then the other half. I said, I'm not doing all that. I'm not doing all that. We're just going to do distance learning, like the whole way around. Because I think one of the unique things and challenges about higher education is because it's such a broad field that touches on and has overlap with so many other fields. And so when you're talking about coming on campus, people need to know what decision points are so they can best prepare both personally and professionally to be the best they can for the fall semester and the spring. Like, we're not even talking about spring 2021 yet. Like, we're still stuck on the fall. And I think as soon as humanly possible, we just need to put it out there. This is not happening. This whole, like, coming back to schools in the fall is not happening, so that people can plan accordingly for, like, childcare and any other thing that, you know, affects their life. The fact that we haven't sort of, like, across the board decided that is actually ridiculous. And in fact, if the fact that we haven't is one of the things that continues to threaten equity. The fact that you can say, well, I'm going to wait till the first week of August or halfway through August to make decisions, when people with low income and poor people and people of color need more time to effectively plan to take care of their families as well as their education, you know, for the fall. And so the fact that we should not be having any other conversations about any hybrid models or anything that requires any student being in any class on campus in the fall.
And that's what it goes to. I was saying earlier that we typically view decisions and solutions from a very privileged point of view. Mm-hmm. And that's the problem. And higher education is so business focused, I should say, where we are viewing money more important than human lives. we don't know right now, but I know for me, it's to just everybody need to stay home. Excuse me, I almost cursed. They make me mad. But we need to stay home. I don't see the point because my program, even though it's hybrid, it's requiring us to come 3 times a semester for cohort weekends. And I'm just like, dude, I don't want to come to campus at all. I want to stay home. So again, I'm just terrified of bringing anything back home to my family, to my son or anything of that nature. So we have to do better.
And one last thing, I feel like just going back to what Kendrick was saying, for me, I agree in that why is there any other approach being considered? Because we don't even know enough for it to be a solid semester. That's like you have to make a cake, right? You need eggs, sugar, and milk. You don't know you need milk. You know you need another ingredient, but you got eggs and you got sugar, and you like, well, let's just try to make this and see what it tastes like. You can't do that when you're considering people's lives. You know, if you don't have all of the ingredients lined up, why are you even considering making this cake? Why don't you just make a cake 6 months from now when you know you have your sugar, you know you have your eggs, you know you have your milk, and you know by using these ingredients, I will be able to make a cake that tastes great. And I am sure about that. But having only a couple of ingredients, let's just throw something together and see what it tastes like. You can't take that approach when you're thinking of people's lives, because it only takes one person to get COVID. Like one person to get COVID. This isn't an ego thing. It's not like, okay, well, I don't want to go because this isn't good enough. This isn't good enough. No, like people could die. Like, why is this even a conversation?
And students, I mean, are we really expecting students to follow every, I mean, let's be honest, we have college students. They don't even follow our policies on a regular basis. And we are literally putting them here. I mean, it's been in the news. They are throwing COVID parties,
yes.
COVID-19 parties where, you know, they are all going there and see who can get COVID first. And it's a bet. And so you've seen that at different institutions and the cases are going crazy. I forgot what university.
Which kind of institutions are those?
Yeah, exactly. But that's the thing we are saying. And granted, again, we are looking from the students by where, okay, students at a younger age, they may not have the most complicated or the most deaths from their populations, but it's the faculty and staff who are very vulnerable, and they can also bring it back to their family. And that's the problem. But again, I just think we are putting a lot of faith into the students to come back to campus and adhere to all of the campus policies and safeguards regarding COVID-19. It's just a gamble I'm not willing to take.
It's not going to work. There is no gamble. It's not going to work. It's not going to work.
And it's less, I mean, we obviously need students to be in the classroom, but there are a lot of faculty who are like, yo, I'm not coming back to campus. Like, that's just not happening. And I think higher ed leaders need to be particular about like putting policies in place to protect those people in their jobs, so that, you know, I feel like higher education is tracking the same mistakes that like we as a country made, right? So instead of just like making the tough decisions early on, we're just like waiting. Right. We're waiting for, I don't know what we're waiting for, but like we're waiting, I think essentially, and I understand in some respects, we're waiting for the situation to be politically less like tenuous. So we're like, okay, let's get to a place where we can make an easier political decision. That's not coming. It's not coming. We just need to deal with the fact that like deal with what it is that we have and we're experiencing now and make decisions accordingly, because anything else, honestly, is really just putting faculty and staff and other stakeholders in a bad position. I mean, I will take this on myself, but I also encourage anybody else who's teaching any kind of kids this fall, like, chill out. Like, if your deadline was at 11:59, you wasn't about to be up at 12:01 reading the papers anyway. So chill.
Hello.
Like, just chill. I'm telling my class straight up, I need to understand and know what's going on in your life, because I'm not about to put you on an academic bender that's going to prevent you from being able to take care of other things in your life, right? But I'm not assigning papers anything. I'm not assigning long papers. First of all, I'm not reading them. And second of all, why are you writing a 20-page paper during a global pandemic? Unless it's about the global pandemic. And if it is, it shouldn't be that long.
Right.
So I really hope faculty members like take to heart the fact that students do not like, they're going to enroll in a class and they're going to sit there on the computer because they're supposed to. And there are students who genuinely have a passion for learning and want to carry on. But we're not going to pretend like we're not in the middle of a global pandemic, one of which is getting worse. And we are getting closer to we're still in the first wave. We're getting closer to what is going to be the second wave because people don't listen and we haven't made the tough decisions.
And even to piggyback on that, it's more, and I think a lot of people also forget, it's more than COVID-19. For me,
Right.
being in school over the summer, and this is because we have that social justice also aspect to our program over the summer, where it's all, our law program is very social justice focused. That's our critical race theory, very pedagogy, all that stuff is all over the summer. So it was also tough for minoritized groups of individuals to go to school during COVID, during Black Lives Matters, the killings of people that look like me on a regular basis. But you are still asking me to go to school, write those same 20-page papers that that you speak of, read all this text, and at the same time, I still have to educate my white counterparts on what my experience is like being a Black male in America and being a Black man in higher education.
Time, you definitely took my next question right out of my mouth. Like, in addition to the fact that we're dealing with COVID, we're in the middle of what some are calling the second coming of the civil rights era, or the second coming of Black power. And so, I want to pose this next question, and if each pastor just give me a relatively brief, because I want to be conscious of time. But what can administrators do to support their Black students?
Yeah, that's a lot. So let me start here. I think in terms of supporting Black students, I think best case scenario, right? We would go into like reforming, program design and curriculum and so on and so forth. We don't have time for all that, and institutions and personnel don't have the capacity for that. And so what I will say is, in terms of what we have the time and likely capacity for, in terms of supporting Black students, is to just be as flexible as humanly possible. Honestly, to be as flexible as humanly possible, and for higher ed professionals to understand the extent to which they have limits in their knowledge and understanding about things. I think what's inexcusable at this point is there's a wealth of resources online. There are a plethora of scholars who do professional development and training and just equity institutes popping up. If you don't know, ask somebody. If you don't know what it's like to teach your Black student, there are plenty of people who are able to answer that question. That answering that question may come with a price point, but people need to eat and live, and you should pay people for their work, right? But just understanding the limitation. If you don't know, ask. There are people who will come in and teach and train your faculty. There are people who will come in and sort of have sort of one-on-one sessions with faculty, staff, administrators. So I would say be as flexible as possible, but also know your limits and ask for help when you need it.
Yeah, so for me, I would definitely say they would need to start by hiring more Black faculty and staff members at their institutions. Harvard, the first institution in higher education here in America, 1636, and even from the 1600s, and we are still seeing in the news, this is the first Black president at this institution. Even here recently, the California being appointed, the very first African American male in this position in a 152-year history of California system. This is your first Black individual. I mean, that right there, it's 2020. We still shouldn't be seeing a lot of first Black anything anymore when we have proven our worth centuries ago. And so again, you need to hire more Black faculty and staff at the institutions, but we also need to stop grouping all people of color and all people of color experience into one. And that's the problem. We look at it, this is people of color. I like, even at Indiana State, I believe they were having some talks of taking the African American Culture Center and calling it just a multicultural center and things of that nature. So you are stripping away the Black identity, and you are grouping all of minoritized groups of individuals together as this is just one monolithic experience, and that's a problem. When and when you're thinking about even creating an environment, a productive learning environment for Black students, for me personally, I feel like we need to move away or start defunding our campus police departments on these institutions. We spend about, on an average, it went from about 2.2 million to about $22 million that are spent from campus police departments. Again, it's coming from a very privileged lens when you believe that campus police it creates this environment of safety for students and things of that nature. That may be what the white student may think, but me as a Black male who grew up with having bad experiences with police officers through my whole K through 12 experience, seeing my friends go through bad experiences, but then you are also giving $20 million to a campus police department and having police walk around campus every day doing rounds. That creates a hostile environment for me, and it is not safe for me to see them coming in and out of my res halls and things of that nature. So I think we should move to a point of we are defunding those campus police departments and moving those funds into services that can actually benefit students, such as the counseling center or things that can address hungriness on the campus. Students experience homelessness. What are you doing for first generation students who may have kids coming into college? Because I was a teen parent, so I had a child coming in college my very first day on a college campus. What are you doing? Are you providing daycare and things? So what are you doing to really elevate the students and put them on a more equitable playing field?
I agree with both of you all. I will say specifically to Tyheem's point that representation 100% matters. I spoke before about how knowing that there was a program specifically for doctoral students of color which was run by a Black woman made me feel very comfortable. I think one thing to help with one way to help Black students, the Black student experience, or however you want to word it, is validation. I think it's very important that when these students are approaching administrators, faculty, staff on campus about different experiences that they've had, that they're believed, right? Don't try to invalidate my experience as though it didn't happen. Don't try to validate my experience as though it's not important, as though if I said that it made me angry, it's not your place to tell me that it didn't make me angry. And so I think, and I've found in my personal experience in just talking specifically to Black students who I've mentored, when someone shows a level of genuine understanding and expresses an empathy, even if that's as far as it goes, the fact that you are sitting here and you're listening to me and you believe what I'm saying and you remember that experience, at some point, the hope is that when you're a part of a conversation and you have a seat at the table where they're talking about students and their experiences, hopefully you can even bring up our story of, I had a conversation with a Black student the other day and they said that they felt very uncomfortable with this specific thing. Maybe we should think about that. Maybe we should consider that before we put forth this programming idea. So I think something as simple as, if a Black student approaches you and they talk to you about having this particular experience, get out of yourself, validate their experience and believe it. That's something that is emphasized and preached in domestic violence situations, rape cases. If someone comes to you, it's not your role to invalidate their experience or to downplay it, to victim blame. Same needs to be for Black students. If I'm telling you that I was spoken to differently than the white student in line before me, don't assume that I'm overreacting. Don't assume that I'm lying. Don't assume that what happened didn't actually happen. And I think that alone goes a long way. So that can tie back to Kendrick was talking about bringing in people who train, empathy training, cultural sensitivity, like all of this kind of stuff can be important in just validating the student experience, Black students' experiences.
Thank you, and thank you all so much. This has been great, and leave it up to me. I go on for hours, but again, I want to be respectful of you all's time. But as we go forward, and you know, we touched a lot today. We talked about doctoral programs. We talked about implications of COVID. We talked about the civil unrest. But what are some and so just in closing, what are a few words that you would like to end with? And in those, I want you to just give a little push. Like, what would you say to an aspiring doctoral student? And in that same lens, what would you say to these programs in regards to recruitment and representation within their programs?
Yeah, so for me, it's funny because if you would have asked me years ago, I would have never thought I would be in a doctoral program, especially this early on. Like I said, my whole thing is I had a son earlier in high school. And so the thing is, I knew that people were able to go to school and get this thing called a financial aid check, and they were able to get extra money. And I did not have a lot of family support. You know, it was either you keep a child and you get out the house, or, you know, you would have to get rid of it and you could stay. And I chose, of course, I'm gonna do my own thing and just keep, you know, and my son is here. And so again, looking at a financial aid, I was like, cool, I'm going to go to college because I need financial help. I just end up liking school and kept going. And so I say all that to say that it's no real plan. It's never too late, but definitely do your homework and do your research on a doctoral program. It's not like one of those things that you just gonna get the doctorate and then you can walk out and you got a 6-figure job land for you right away. You need to make sure that program that you are going for, research it, make sure, and that's any program, honestly, research that institution, what they stand for, their history, know yourself too, because these programs will try their best to break you. And even people in the program may even look at you and think that you're not worth it. And if you know yourself and you are very confident within yourself, it's nothing out here that can stop you. You will see it through regardless. And that's the thing for me, is that I made sure I had a reason why. So I knew my why. I wanted to make sure my son would never experience anything I experienced. And that was enough for me to make sure that I would never give up, regardless of how tough a situation was for me. But I definitely will also say, look at ways that get that program funded. It's a lot of graduate assistantships, like residential life positions, that will still pay you professional salary while you're gaining professional experience. It will pay for your apartment, your utilities, they furnish everything for you, give you a meal plan, and your institution may offer, like Indiana State did for me, 80% off. There's other graduate assistantships and scholarships that will give you 100% off. Things of that nature. So definitely look at ways of funding it. No more student loans. I'm not trying to put any other Black people more in debt than some may already be. And so definitely just research your institution and definitely find ways to fund it. And for recruiters and recruitment for departments, diversify your students. You definitely need to look at admitting students that with a very diverse population in mind.
I'll be brief. I think just offering like words of advice or just ways to navigate is like, once you work so hard for your doctorate, like make it work for you. Unless you really want to, like, you know, there are people who already predetermined they want to go the faculty route, and that's amazing, that's fine. But not everybody fits in that boat. And I've had a very non-traditional pathway. And I just categorically reject the idea that you reach the pinnacle of academic success just so that other people tell you what to do. Like that just doesn't make sense. And the second thing I'll say is, you know, don't take yourself too seriously. We're not over here curing cancer. Like, it's just not, like, don't take yourself too seriously. And I say that because, like, I work with a lot of STEM students, and I think sometimes faculty in the STEM, or I do a lot of STEM research, and sometimes faculty in the STEM field are not the most welcoming. And so although we are not sort of curing cancer, you may be teaching a student who's going to go on and cure it. And so you need to make sure, like, you are creating an environment where, like, people want to stay and thrive and succeed where you are. And last but not least, you know, know what you're getting yourself into. Like, unapologetically ask 1,000 questions of all the people you know that are in doctoral programs or doctoral program adjacent, because you need to know what you're getting yourself into. And I want to make a generalization. It's not, I stand by it. It's not the same in every situation, but, you know, if you're looking at a doctoral program, don't just look at the faculty and things like that, but also look at the size of the cohort. Because if you have a cohort that's like 10 or 11, 12 people, and you align with like peer support models, like you might do well there. If you're in a cohort just like 3 or 4 people, that might not be the best fit program for you. And so, yeah, make your doctor work for you. Don't take yourself too seriously, and ask plenty of questions.
And Whit, you want to take us home?
Yeah.
I do. So mine is I've been sitting here writing. So one of the things that I do that I've been doing for like 2.5 years now, I do document editing. So I have been looking at dissertations for years. I've been looking at research papers, etc. And I've talked to so many people who are at the dissertation stage of their doctoral program. So my advice is specifically going to be about the dissertation. And this is cool because 2 of you all will be going through this, perhaps are currently in this process. So one big thing is that people build up the dissertation, though it is huge. It's a big deal. People build up the dissertation like this is going to be your one and only chance to write that one dynamic publication or that one dynamic manuscript that's going to change the world. No, you are writing a paper so you can present it and you can graduate. You will start doing the monumental stuff unless you've had the opportunity to hang on the coattails of a faculty member who has added your name to a publication after theirs because you've done all the work. Unless you've been fortunate enough to have that experience, you are really going to be catapulted and take off after you graduate. People put so much pressure on themselves during this dissertation process. And I know that it's a big deal, but a couple of tips. One, people make it out to be this behemoth, right? But you have to break it down piece by piece. You write one chapter at a time. You write one page at a time. You've likely received this piece of advice before, but even if like every day is going to be different. One thing I did was on days where I felt like I could not create any content, I worked on references. I needed to do something that was mindless but productive. So just try your best to do something every day and create a schedule for yourself. What works for you? It doesn't have, you don't have to have 8-hour days. If you have an hour or two Monday through Thursday, then let that be your routine. But creating that mental routine for yourself does something for your level of productivity. You may be in a room for 8 hours, but you're only productive for 3 of those hours. Whereas for 2 hours, you're working the entire time. So as much as you can create both a writing routine or a writing schedule, have a writing space, which may not be at the house. Well, it might be now because COVID, but it may not be at the house. It may be at a coffee shop. For me, it was a particular room in the education building, and I had a writing partner. For me, it was somebody that was actually in my program, but it doesn't have to be somebody in your program. It could be somebody who needs a space and time to also be productive alongside someone who's being productive. But your mind does something when it has a routine. You feel productive when you know, okay, I need to be up at 8 o'clock every morning, or I need to be in this particular space at 6 o'clock. And I know that this space is my writing space. And another thing too is I just want to emphasize that the dissertation is the beginning. If you have a chair, if you are so passionate about this particular thing, people will die. What's die on the cross? I forgot the term, but people will die for their research topic. I get it. This is very important to you. This is your life. This is the work that you want to do. But if your chair is not on board, you better change that research topic, adjust. Flexibility. If this is the person that is signing off on whether or not you are going to be able to pass and graduate, if you don't change that I before E except after C, if they tell you to do that, listen, and as soon as you graduate, you can go back and research whatever it is that you want to do. But I think people get very caught up and stressed out by making the dissertation into this enormous thing. That's why you have so many people that are ABD, because they blow the dissertation up into be this impossible feat. That's what it is. It's hard. is super hard, probably the hardest thing you're ever going to do, but it is not impossible. And you have to tell yourself that before you even start writing, so that you know that this is a process that people actually get through and people actually make it. So you just, you do it bit by bit, piece by piece. And I have to talk a lot of people off the ledge sometimes to be like, dude, you've gotten through years of coursework. That was hard. Dissertation, it'll get figured out. It'll get figured out.
Thank you all so much. This has been such an informative conversation. This is such an uplifting conversation. And I appreciate each and every one of you so much for joining us here on Voices of Black Folk and sharing such an important topic that's paramount to our community. So thank you so very much. And I hope all of you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.